a Eulogy. My take on Yang Hanchu's bigger picture. I write this memory in lieu of a eulogy for Yang Han, and Yang Han is the way he used to pronounce his name in English. I would like to mention only one rarely noticed characteristic of Yang Han, one that even his beloved teacher, Professor Hu Fu, might have not detected. Specifically, Yang Han would never engage in fruitless debating to clarify confusion or calumny if the conditions did not appear ready for such engagement. This is a little like Confucius, who advised temporary retirement from public life during periods of chaos. This characteristic alludes to an intellectual disposition toward the bigger picture, the longer term, and the cohabitation of many worlds. Therefore, Yang Han declined my offer to debate on his behalf with the younger colleagues who challenged his integrity when he expressed reservation about the pseudo-liberal democratic appeal of the Sunflower Movement. He specifically told me that he did not wish to engage with those Green Guards. In my opinion, however, he wasn't giving up on them. Rather, he would certainly work on an overall enlightening environment that will only emerge with time. Yang Han had begun publicly to question the validity of treating social science as a universal methodology since at least the beginning of the 2010s. Threads of such alienation had been emerging in his syllabi before the turn of the century. Given over a decade of warming up, he was more than ready to take off after being elected an academician, a credit that enabled him to move beyond political correctness. Other than Marxism, which Yang Han's early teaching career employed to reveal the cruelty of liberal capitalism, his increasing curiosity about the post-Western thought in the past decade pointed to many of the problematic presumptions of modern social science. In fact, he stood at the vanguard of a mutually beneficial relationship between post-Western and Chinese studies. His inspiring endeavor is now critically endangered. Sensitive readers who are literate in both English and Chinese might sense the alienation of Yang Han's good governance work, usually in Chinese, from his barometer work, mostly in English. Nevertheless, Yang Han incorporated the notion of good governance into some of his English writings, as it is not entirely unfriendly to the political agenda of the barometer research, which is to spread democracy. In this regard, he enlisted Francis Fukuyama's reflections on the seeming incapacity of liberalism for good governance to desensitize his own purpose of codifying participatory democracy, or disqualifying it. Yang Han took care to reserve his analytical lens of systemic culture that he acquired from Professor Hu, mainly for his Chinese audience. This concept critically attributes the failing democracy in Taiwan to a culture of systemic cleavages crafted by the past imperialism and colonialism. I think that he judges that this concept is only ready for those who have already suffered under imperialism and colonialism, historical as well as contemporary. In other words, his Anglo-Saxon colleagues based in the former colonizing lands were not yet ready for such a theoretical lens. Unfamiliar with disposition toward the bigger picture, the attack on the alleged China turn in his more recent Chinese writings were destined to invoke no response from him. After all, Yang Han could not possibly abandon Barometer, which was his home, even if the rise of China gave him a distinct insight into the insufficiency and the bias of liberal democracy, now illuminated by a pluriversal light. If heaven had allowed him a few more years to grow his China scholarship, I feel sure that barometer would still have a promising future, not only in the post-colonial world in general and in China in particular, but also in the hopelessly involuting liberal West. What I want to say is that Yang Han's style of avoiding fruitless debating and preparing overall reconciliation for a common future is advertently aimed at believers in both Chinese socialism and Western liberalism, for the former to understand why the aversion to autocracy in China can result from spontaneity rather than entirely top-down manipulation, and the latter to appreciate why the Chinese autocracy cannot help but attend to the hearts of the people instead of simply abusing their power. Without his continuous leadership, however, Yang Han strived for mutual learning and unlearning between liberal democracy and the Confucian socialist autocracy immediately loses steam. I may be overly pessimistic, and Yang Han would not want to see pessimism. I may be guilty of projecting my own passion into his bigger picture, while Yang Han used to be nuanced and delicate. In any case, I will continue with what I see him leave, in the hope that I might somehow ease the loss of our time.